Hi, I'm Susan Rutledge, and in this video, I'm going to show you how to use the spiral tool in Adobe Illustrator. First, I'm going to just show you the basics of the tool, and then I'll show you a couple of designs that I created to give you an idea of what you can do with the spiral tool. So let's move to a blank document and get started. Now, to access the spiral tool, you're going to have the advanced toolbar set up on the left side of your workspace. If you're not seeing two columns of icons on the left side, then go up to Window, down to Toolbars, and you can click Advanced here. Then you'll come over to the left toolbar and press down with your mouse on the line segment tool to get the flyout menu, and here's where we find the spiral tool. There's not a keyboard shortcut, so this is the only way that you can access this tool. Now, once it's selected, you can click on the artboard to open the spiral dialog box, and here we have some options. I'll explain them in a minute, but first I'm going to say OK and have Illustrator create our first spiral. And I want to give it a 1-point stroke so it's easy to see. And then I'm going to remove the bounding box. So we'll go up to View and Hide Bounding Box or Shift Command B. It's a keyboard shortcut that I recommend you learn because when you're working with the spiral tool, you're going to go back and forth between that bounding box. Right now I have it turned off. Now let's come back and get the dialog box and look at these options. When we think of radius, it typically means the measurement from the center of a circle to the outside of a circle, but with a spiral, what it's measuring is the distance between the outermost anchor or end point of the spiral and the next anchor or end point that follows along the stroke of the spiral. Now, to check that out, let's cancel this and get the rectangle tool, and I'm going to place my cursor on the outside end point and drag to the next end point or anchor, and you can see the little text box to the right of my mouse that shows it indeed is 3 inches. Now that radius measurement is only for the first segment because we have a decay of 80%. And that means that as we move towards the center of the spiral, each segment is going to have a radius that's 80% less than the one before it. So the first segment was 3 inches. The next segment, if we measured it out, would be 3 inches times 80% or 2.4 inches, and it would reduce by 80% as you go around the spiral. The number of segments that we have are the strokes in between our anchors or our end points. So with 10 set, we can count 10 on our spiral. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Now, as segments are added, they're always added to the center of the spiral. So the more segments you have, the more difficult it is for you to count as the spiral gets tighter. And then finally, the style, you can choose whether you want the spiral to be counterclockwise or clockwise. So with the dialog box, you can have very specific control over the size and all the details of your spiral. But you can also simply drag out a spiral. So let's close this and delete this spiral. And I still have the tool active. So I'm going to drag from the top down, and I'll hold the space bar down so I can drag down to the center of my artboard. The counterclockwise option is chosen, but as I drag from the top down, the outer edge of the spiral is going to be down. If I drag from the bottom up, the outside edge of that spiral is going to be at the top. Now, in the spiral dialog box, Illustrator is going to remember the last spiral that we created. We drug out a spiral that was bigger than the original one that had the 3-inch radius. So let's see what this one is. We've increased the radius to a little over 5 inches, but the decay remained the same and the segments remained the same. Now, if I wanted to create a spiral that has more segments, here's what I would do. Let's delete this and drag out another spiral. I haven't released my mouse, and as I'm holding it down, I'm going to press the up arrow key. And notice in the center, each time I press the up arrow key, I'm adding a segment. And as I said earlier, the segments are always added to the center of the spiral. If I want to decrease the number of segments in my spiral, I press the down arrow key and I remove those segments. And we can look here on the dialog box, and now Illustrator tells us we have 7 segments created. Let's close this out, and then let's come back and change the radius to 3 and the segments to 10. And say OK, and then delete that. We're going to drag out another spiral, and this time as I start to drag, I'm going to hold the Command key down, and when I do, Illustrator allows me to change both the radius and the decay at the same time. So you can see how it's changing back and forth, and we can look here in the spiral dialog box. The radius changed to a little over 1, the decay to 85%, but the segments remained the same. Now let's go back to 3 and 80 and say OK, and we'll delete both of these. This time, as I start to drag out, I'm going to hold the Command key and the up arrow key down. I wait until I've started to drag, and you've got to drag really slowly because Illustrator goes kind of crazy with those 2 keys down. Now we want to get the bounding box again, so back up to View, Show Bounding Box, or Shift Command B. I'll hold the Shift key down, and I'm going to drag to increase the size of the spiral. And you can see, since we've added a lot of segments, you can't even see anything but black in the center of the spiral. And if we look at the details, you see the radius is a lot smaller and the number of segments is much larger. So those are the basics on using the spiral. Now, what can you use it for? You can make all sorts of different designs. I'm going to change the specs back here to 3 and 80 and 10. And then I'm going to increase the size of the spiral, and then we're going to remove the bounding box, Shift Command B. I'm going to change the weight of the stroke. Let's make this 30 and click on the artboard to activate that. And then I'm going to get the width tool. It's on the left toolbar. This is what it looks like. Keyboard shortcut Shift W. And I'm going to move to the very center of my spiral, and we're going to bring the points together all the way tight, and then I'm going to increase the rest of the spiral to the outside, and then let's come to the end and intersect those 2 points there. And you can play around with this. I think I'm going to make these just a little bit wider and a little bit wider here, and I think that looks great. So let's get the bounding box again, hold the Shift key down and resize the design. And once I have it the way I want it, I'm going to go up to Object and expand the appearance, and then we'll remove the bounding box again, Shift Command B, and I'm going to change the fill color. I think I'm going to put a gradient in here. And then we're going to add some copies. So I'm going to use the Rotate tool located on the left toolbar, keyboard shortcut R, and I'll place my cursor on that outside anchor. I'm not pressing down yet. First, I'm going to hold the Option key down and then click on the anchor, and that opens the Rotate dialog box. We're going to type in 360 for the circle and then divide it by 6. Those are the number of repeats that I want around the circle, and I'm going to press Copy. And then to duplicate that move, I'll use the keyboard shortcut Command D, and I'm going to repeat that until I have 6 spirals around my design. And then let's move this up where we can get a good look at it. Now, there are a couple of things you can do with this design. You could select it and come up to Effect, Stylize, and add a drop shadow, and that looks pretty nice. If you want to get a little fancier, you can come to the Pathfinder area and click on the divide, and the divide coupled with the gradient gives you another really neat effect. And then to give it a background, I'm going to add the bounding box back in, Shift Command B, resize the design, and we're going to hold down the Option key to make a copy and the Shift key so it stays in the same horizontal line. And then I'm going to come to the Pathfinder area and click on Unite. Then with this piece, I'm going to change the color to black, and then let's add a 10-point stroke. And next I'll select the design and the black background, and we'll come to the Align area and click on Horizontal Align Center and Vertical Align Center. Now the black piece is covering the design, so what I need to do is move to the Layers panel, and we see that the black solid piece is on top of the design. It needs to be underneath it on the list so that it is underneath it on the artboard, and that's looking really nice. Let's make it a little larger. And I think that is really beautiful. And then let me show you one more design that you can make. I'm going to hide this layer. We're going to come back and get the spiral tool again. So we're going to click here and say OK. And I don't need this to be that thick. Let's go ahead and come down to 1 point. And then we're going to get the Ellipse tool, keyboard shortcut L. And I'm going to first create an ellipse on the outside end point. So with my mouse right on that end point, I'm going to press down with my mouse, hold the Option key down to draw from the center out, and the Shift key to make a perfect circle. And let's make this about 1/2 inch. And then I'm going to fill this with a dark green, and then we're going to create another ellipse at the center. And I'm going to hold the Option and Shift key down again and drag, and this time I'm going to change this to a lighter green. Then I'll select both the center ellipse, hold down the Shift key, and select this larger ellipse on the outside. I'm going to go to Object, down to Blend, and I'll choose Blend Options. Now make sure that you have specified steps chosen. I'll leave this at 35 for now, and on the orientation you're going to want the second choice aligned to path and say OK. Nothing happened because we were only choosing the options, so now we've got to go back up to Object, down to Blend, and choose Make. Now this doesn't look too exciting at this point, but if we select the spiral and our blend and come back to Object, down to Blend, and choose Replace Spine, Illustrator distributes the blend all the way around our spiral. And that's pretty cool, but I do want the circles to be closer together, so I'll select the spiral and again go back up to Object, down to Blend, and once again to Blend Options. And I'm going to just scroll with my mouse and increase the number of specified steps until I have the look that I want, and then I'll say OK. Now once I have the design the way I want it, Again, I'm going to create a circle with repeating spirals. I'll get the rotate tool, keyboard shortcut R, place my cursor at the center of the outside anchor, hold down the option key and click down with my mouse. And we're going to change the angle to 360 divided by 6. Press copy. And then I want to duplicate the move. Command D, Command D, Command D, and Command D. And I'll select all of these and move them to the center. And then to add a little interest, let's see what a drop shadow looks like. We'll say OK. And you can see that there are all sorts of things that you can create using the spiral tool. Well, I hope you've enjoyed this video and that you're anxious to try this spiral tool to make all sorts of designs for your projects. I do want to invite you to subscribe to my channel and be sure to click the notification bell so you don't miss any of my future tutorials. Now, I will look forward to seeing you again soon. Thank you so much for watching. Bye now.